Hi YouTubers, Andre from the DIY bench here. In today's video I want to show you how I converted my German bolt action rifle to a sports shooting rifle. I'm just going to give you a little background first. My dad inherited this Mauser from his dad, and he cleaned it up. He also received a box of, I think 3 boxes of bullets, and he cleaned it up. And you can, if I hold this close to the camera, you can see he sanded it all down. He gave it a nice coat of varnish. So the rifle when I was little was not original anymore once he did this. The other thing he had done was he had it rechambered to accept a 6.5 by 5.7 round, because he could not get the original. I'm not sure what the original round size was. He got a lot of clicks when he tried to fire the rifle, and by putting a piece of electric tape on the shoulder of the cartridge here, the bullet would fire. And obviously later on he would learn from a gunsmith that those bullets didn't exist anymore, or if they did, it would just be too much of a hassle to get them. So he had it chambered to accept the 6.5 by 5.7. So the rifle, by the time I inherited it, was not original anymore. I tried to sell it, but because, as we all know, a collector's piece you cannot touch. It needs to be as is. And I was not much of a hunter back then, so the rifle was in my cupboard, and it really got to a bad stage of rust. And that's why I tried to sell it originally. My dad used to hunt with it, but I mean, you're either a hunter or you're not. So the next best step for me was to convert it to a sport shooting rifle, and I knew I would definitely use it then. So I know I'm going to get a lot of flack from collectors and guys that know about guns, but like I said, I don't have a son, so the rifle will one day just, I don't know what will happen to it. But so in order to get some use of it, I'm going to show you what I have done to it, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hate comments, but that's fine. Now, I think the biggest modification that I've done to this gun was to shorten the barrel. And now you'll see, from the rifle used to be, and I mean they've got quite a long length of barrel. So I wasn't sure how long, so I cut it in a couple of stages. And I mean you can see I took a lot of it off. And I took this last part off because the modification I had on the gun was actually, I just liked it and I just went with it. So I got rid of that length of barrel. I'm just going to put them aside. And I'm just going to continue on this part, and as you can see, I took the side, the front sights or the rear sight. I took all of that off. The gun had a scope on it, and the gunsmith, while he did the chamber to accept a new round, he obviously had to warm this up. I mean, the original position of that straight, and you can see the difference there from there to there. So when you take the scope off, obviously this is done to clear the scope. So when you take the scope off, and I mean also when it's bent like that, to get a grip on it and to reload is just very hard. So I got a new bolt for it, and this one is in a terrible state, but I did a little bit of sanding on it and it works okay. Although it's an old Mauser, it's an old firearm, it's really stiff. I opened the whole thing up and I did some oiling and some sanding, but it's still stiff, but it works. Okay, now when I took the scope off, I added this bar here made from aluminum, and you'll see later when I assemble the rifle why I did that. Obviously I took the wooden parts off the gun. This goes on, this used to go on top of the gun, like there. I took the bottom of it off, took that off, and this, I'm just gonna, there was no modifications. Well, I did a modification there, but I'll explain it when I get to that. Now you'll see, obviously, I sawed the butt, the stock of the gun, I sawed off. And I mean, this is the only part of the gun I kept, the wooden part of it, which I did some camo on. And I think I'm gonna have this dipped rather than having this fabric on it. It will, this camo is I wanted a light camo, but I couldn't find any of that. But yes, so I ended up with this, and I made a pistol grip from a 3D printed part. I made out of wood. Parts I acquired, this part. And then a nice long rail. And in the front of the rail I added this, I made this part out of aluminum. I'll talk some more about that when I get to the assemble part. And then some bits and pieces. You'll see when they go in. I made this part for underneath, but you'll see when they go together. I added this to it. This goes on top of the rail. This is a red dot sight. It can also be converted to green. It's got a setting here at the bottom. And this part I got from a paintball gun. Now the barrel of this paintball gun was quite thick at the front, so I used it to my advantage. I had to mill it out just a little bit to fit on the barrel, and I added 4 grub screws here, but it will make sense when I assemble the gun. The other thing I had to do here was, because this takes a bolt from the bottom, and the bolt actually goes in here from that way, and the reason I put this one in, this one goes through the top. Once you've got this on, there's no way of getting this bolt in, because then you have to remove that. But I realized it was not really necessary, because you can put this in and then later on you can add that, so this was not really necessary. But that's the way it goes with these things, you know, you don't know where you're going to end up with. Alright, so let's put it together. I'm just going to start at the bottom here. if you add some camo, obviously you have to make sure that you don't put thick camo material in places where you're gonna find it difficult to push like this in, because it will just not go in. Make sure it clears your bolt release mechanism. Mine didn't clear the first time. Okay, so I'm just gonna take my screwdriver now. I'm just gonna, I can just as well turn this in by hand. Now obviously some of you are thinking, well, what happens when the bolt comes out? But you've got to make sure that this go in all the way. That's what I had to do in any case. I just had to make sure that it would go in far enough and the bolt would come in, so it still clears the bolt when it should slide out. The assemble part of it, the sequence of assembly doesn't really matter. I'm just going to go next with this. In the trigger guard, I drilled a hole. Yeah, not sure if it's visible. Here at the back. And I threaded that because that was the only way I could get this to fit on here. And I'm just going to push it out here so you can see exactly what's going on here. So if you push this out, you'll see I've got the hole in there that runs right through. So the X bolt goes in there, goes right in there, and we might have some difficulty because you got to make sure that this goes on as stiff as possible. So I'm just going to support it against my body. It should line up. I really had a difficult time with this part of the assembly, but I think it's just going to work because I already did the hard work. So that goes in, and I think it's at its end. I'm just going to do it too tight, and sometimes it would move around, and I mean you can just, you're going to have to get a feel for how tight you can go. But there we go, and you'll see the nut, the bolt threads which just come out here. So you can, that used to be long, I cut it off a little. So now it actually, when you pull the trigger, it doesn't touch. Okay, I think we can now go to the rail part. Now if I hold it up, you'll see that the hole in here is not quite in the middle, and there's a good reason that as this goes on, this part of the barrel doesn't go in at the center either. It slightly hangs off, so that's why there's an offset in the front. It took me a while to come up with all the ways so all of this fits together. So at the top, I'm just going to put that little bolt in there. It goes through here. Now I'm just going to pull this out again. I'm just going to show you that in the rail there's a channel at the bottom, actually on either side, bottom, top, left and right. So I made this to slide into the channel, and obviously as soon as it gets to this point here where it cannot move further, it should be in line with the hole. Just want to turn it this way. We get this, that goes in there. Now I'm just going to say that if you put together, and that really goes for anything that you're going to modify, you're going to always end up doing certain things more than once because you just don't know how it's going to turn out. And there's always something you never thought about. Okay, so this is still loose. Then at the bottom here, I've got a plate, I've got a piece of aluminum as a spacer, I've got this bolt, and this goes in here. Now, Mauser owners will know I'm not familiar with other kind of firearms, bolt action rifles, but this lower and upper part of the actual body is held together by only two bolts, one at the bottom here, but one I put in from the top, and the one here at the bottom at the front. I'm not gonna tighten that yet, because as I move to the front you will see, and I think I've already tightened this one too much, just gonna loosen it so it moves a little. Now this is where this comes into play. Now the barrel of the rifle tapers down all the way as it comes